Hello and welcome back to the newest episode of the Ryan and Logan Fantasy Show. This being a Monday, December 14th, 2020. And you know what? I am so relieved because my round one fantasy playoff matchup, it was close. I fell down to a 21-point deficit on Thursday night because of that dumb Rams defense. I'm not gonna lie, I was pretty pissed. But then somebody came to my rescue in those 1 o'clock games, and his name is Allen freaking Robinson. The amount of times we talked about this man, and of course that man saves my season, it's a blessing. I ended up winning my matchup by 3 points because Ebron didn't meet his projection, and honestly, I feel so good. It's like a weight have been lifted off my shoulders.
I mean, I think your prayers have been answered. I think Allen Robinson finally has a quarterback. Is Mitch Trubisky the answer?
Is Mitch Trubisky the actual answer?
Never seen them together before,
No.
so this is all new.
This is maybe Super Mitch. We don't know. But I'm going to say no. I'm going to say this is just no way.
Yeah, that's both of us there.
Okay, so the plan for this episode today is we're going to go over the Week 14 recap, so playoff round number 1 of your fantasy. We're going to recap that, see what happened, what we thought were newsworthy and whatnot, and what might have been surprising, what might not be. And then I'm going to have a new segment. It's going to be called Something or Nothing. And we're going to go over certain players or certain storylines in the fantasy season that we either think is a something that's going to continue, or we think it's a nothing and it's just an anomaly that just happened out of nowhere. So, we are going to start off Week 14, the Thursday nighter that was between the Rams and the Patriots. Logue, what did you think?
I mean, Cam Akers is pretty good, apparently. I don't know what took him so long to start getting the work, but he looked electric. It was impressive.
I'm not gonna. Yeah, when I was watching that game and I saw him just repeatedly run off 8-yard runs, 9-yard runs, like big chunk plays at a time, and it was just him out on the field, I thought to myself, "Holy crap! Is this guy now just a bell cow back? That if you maybe picked him up off waivers like 2 weeks ago, or you stashed him for the whole season, that you're just gonna luck into a guy that's an RB1, RB2 for the rest of the season?" Like, I genuinely think you might have, because he played 80% of the snaps in that game. He's got roughly about 13 red zone targets since week 11. And you know what? That's something that is super valuable when it comes to fantasy running backs.
Yeah, you want those red zone touches.
And in an offense like the Rams that is going to be competing for a divisional title, it's going to be something that, is very valuable to have it on a really good offense.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing for me is Cam Akers, 29 rush attempts, 3 targets. Darrell Henderson, 2 rushes, 0 targets, and Malcolm Brown didn't record a rush. So it was all Cam Akers, which is new for that offense. And if you can get the workhorse running back in that offense, he's generally been a stud.
Yeah, other than that, the only thing that could have really helped you or really kind of pissed you off like it did for me was that Rams defense, which has just proven that it is still elite, and Aaron Donald and the rest of those guys are just doing what they should be doing, and they're going to be home wreckers, and they could honestly maybe carry your team to a fantasy championship. It almost made me lose my matchup, so if it can help somebody beat me, maybe it can help you win a couple matchups.
Yeah, I mean, they got the Jets next week, so
that is a massive smash spot for that defense.
Yeah, that's gonna be a great start.
All right, so we're gonna start here. Falcons Chargers. What'd you think?
I mean, the matchup of the teams that don't want to win. They don't know how to win, and I mean, it kind of played out.
It was weird because both teams, as a fan of the Falcons, both teams don't know how to win in the fourth quarter, and yet one of them was going to have to win in the fourth quarter, and we somehow managed to blow the game late, and I was so happy. I was so happy that the Chargers beat us. But other than that, you know what? I feel like Keenan Allen did what Keenan Allen does. He's getting a ton of targets. He gets a ton of receptions. And with Mike Williams out, that could be huge coming up for this Thursday night game with the Raiders. He could have a way bigger target share. Other than that, Herbert's been kind of disappointing the last couple games. Ever since, I think it was, I gotta take a look at Justin Herbert here, but yeah, since he played the Jets in Week 11 where he scored 27 fantasy points, since then he's had 17 points against the Bills, 6 against the Patriots and now 16 against Atlanta. Getting 16 against Atlanta does worry me a little bit.
Yeah, that's a disappointing result.
It's a disappointing result, but you know what? It's just one of those things that if it costs you your week, it sucks. But you know what? Like he throws the ball still a ton. He had 243 yards for 2 touchdowns. He did throw a pick there late when they were starting to march down the field, so maybe his numbers could have been a little bit higher, but other than that, I'm not too really worried about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest takeaway, especially from that offense, is Austin Eckler is a fantasy stud, especially if you're in a PPR. Like we talked about it last week, the targets he's been getting, and yet again, 9 targets, 9 catches, which if you can get that out of your running back, that's basically what Alvin Kamara was doing to be great this season, and Eckler's been doing the same thing.
Yeah, he's been unreal, and the fact that, you know what, they love doing the little short dump off passes, and they love throwing to their running backs. That's huge for Eckler. He's a big guy. He's a big play guy, and if he's getting a ton of targets like that, it's going to really help out.
Yeah, and his 3 games since he came back from injury, 9 targets, 16 targets.
Mm-hmm.
So like, if you were able to make the playoffs with him, like on your bench or in your IR slot, you've got an absolute stud going into the playoffs.
You're laughing right now.
Yeah, like that's a guy who could win people fantasy championships this year.
No doubt. And I think for the Falcons side of the ball, I think the one thing we can probably take away from this is that if Julio Jones is out, only start Calvin Ridley and nobody else. And if Julio Jones is healthy, maybe start everybody else. Because at this point, the Falcons' offense looks terrible. They can't get anything going. Matt Ryan doesn't really... I don't think he knows how to actually throw to his receivers at the moment. It's terrible. He had 1 passing touchdown. And as a guy who owns Hayden Hurst, I had to bench him this week because I didn't trust that offense, and he didn't let me down because he didn't do anything. So I think if you have anybody on the Falcons, you have to basically rely on if Julio's going to be healthy or not.
Yeah, I think we also might be seeing the end of Todd Gurley's run as a fantasy asset, maybe for his career. Like, his last 3 weeks, 6 rushes, 8 rushes, 8 rushes. Like, this week, Ito Smith had 11 rushes to Todd Gurley's 6. Ito Smith is not a good running back.
No.
But that's what Todd Gurley is at this point. Like, now that he's lost the volume that kind of carried him all year, I don't know how you can justify starting him at really, like, it's just 3 straight weeks with under 10 total touches.
Mm-hmm.
That's very... I don't even know if I'd say it's concerning at this point. I think it's just that you have to bench him. You can't trust him.
It's panic button time for
Gurley. It was always kind of coming all year. Like, there was question marks. He didn't look that effective. The touchdowns were kind of saving him, and now that those are gone, the touches are going down. Like, I don't see much of a redeeming factor there.
Mm-hmm. All right, Bears and Texans. Now, for me, I was genuinely surprised that I had Allen Robinson, like I mentioned. He saved my week, but I was going up against David Montgomery. And I'm not going to lie, David Montgomery has looked like a stud. Like, I think that offense in general, it's clicking. Even Mitch Trubisky, he's throwing the football a ton. He's getting his fantasy points. Allen Robinson and David Montgomery are getting fantasy points. Like, it's almost at the point where, like, you can rely on the Chicago Bears offense again. It's weird.
It's wild. Especially, like, David Montgomery, his whole career has looked incredibly average. Like, I don't know if I can ever remember plays like last year or most of this year where it's like, wow, he looks great. He never looks terrible, but he just kind of looks like he gets exactly what he should. And then all of a sudden, the last few weeks, he's been breaking big plays. He's been shedding tackles. Like, it's been impressive to watch. I'm not really sure where it came from, but he looks like a much better player all of a sudden.
He looks like a man possessed, that he just looks like he's had some rough goes the last couple weeks in this season, and now he's deciding, all right, I'm going to take it up to 100 now and just start playing really, really good football. And on the other side of the ball with the Texans, it's, you know what? Will Fuller was huge, as a massive loss, I think even bigger than we realized, because Deshaun Watson doesn't look like he can do anything really. That O-line can't protect him. And
no Brandon Cooks this week too was brutal.
It was not good at all. So like Deshaun Watson, there's a little bit of red flag for him when it comes up, because like now you got to worry about a lot of guys being healthy or not. So again, I'm not really overly pumped about him anymore.
Yeah, I was, with how that game started, I was getting ready to come back on the podcast and say, like, I guess you just start Deshaun Watson because he's so good. And then all of a sudden they scored. I think that was an early touchdown. I remember seeing it early in the game that he was putting up a decent week. Then all of a sudden, it's like partway into the second quarter, he scores the touchdown. It looked like he's going to be on pace for another great week. And then that offense just completely sputtered out with just a complete lack of weapons.
Mm-hmm. I feel like, all right, so with this recap, just we're not going to cover every game. We're just going to cover like the games that we really want to look into here. So yeah, so what were you going to say, Luke?
But also, if you can play anyone against that Texans defense, like as much as we're saying the Bears offense looks playable, that's at least partially because that Texans defense is one of the worst I've seen
That
lately.
Texans defense is the most beatable defense, I think, in the NFL right now. It is bad.
Yeah, it's so terrible. And they actually have an offense that most games will be able to, even without Will Fuller, like the Bears defense is great, but I think most games they'll be able to keep close enough that it won't be a New York Jets where you're just running the ball half the game because they're so far ahead.
Yeah. And now this next game I want to talk about hits Logan close to the heart. It's the Chiefs. And you know what? We saw something very abnormal this week. We saw Pat Mahomes throw not one, not two, but 3 picks in this game. And for fantasy, you always think when you got Pat Mahomes, you know what? He's not going to throw a whole lot of picks. But this Dolphins defense showed up, and they made his life pretty miserable for the first little bit of that game. Like, the Dolphins looked pretty competitive, and then until all of a sudden he was down by double digits, and then Mahomes turns into Super Mahomes, and then just takes their team to a stupid lead, and then they get bored, and then they get the game close again. But you know what? Like, the game, like the Chiefs are the Chiefs. You're going to have Kelsey. You're going to have Hill. You're going to have Pat Mahomes do their things. And other than that, looks like you're going to have to take your shot with Clyde. Almost it feels like for the rest of the season that maybe he gets a touchdown or not. Other than that, it's like that offense is stupid.
Yeah, I mean, Pat Mahomes, that first quarter is the worst he's ever played in his career. Like, he took a 30-yard sack where he literally just turned and ran towards his own end zone and then got sacked. Like, it was one of the worst. It was baffling. He threw his first pick. Like, they were both technically tipped balls, but they were both bad decisions. And then he's like, oh, right, I'm the best player in the world. Let me just throw for 400 yards in my worst career start.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you have Pat Mahomes, he doesn't have bad games. Like, that's the one guy that you can maybe make an argument for an early pick in fantasy because he has the ceiling and he just doesn't have bad games. It's not a thing.
Yeah, it's weird because, again, like, for my match, I feel like every game we talked about, it was going up against these guys, but I had to go up against a stack of Tyreek and Pat Mahomes. I'm not going to lie, that is the stack in the NFL right now where I am terrified to go up against. And lo and behold, there you go, it had it. They got a massive 40-yard bomb, Pat Mahomes to Tyreek Hill, and then he had a 30-yard rushing touchdown. So now I'm just like, oh, great, he can do it both ways. And I think the thing that probably saved me was Xavier Howard having an unbelievable pick in the end zone.
Yeah, that's one of the best plays I've seen out of the corner in a long time. You know what? It was actually beat. I don't know if you saw. I think it was Moore for the Colts came up with one of the most insane picks I've seen.
I feel like this week we got 2 of the most insane picks in the end zone that I've seen all season.
Yeah, those are 2 just unbelievable plays.
Yeah, and it's just, you know what? That was huge. That could have got Tyreek his 3rd touchdown of the game. So it's, again, like we said, the Chiefs offense, you can rely on their big 3 every week and they're going to provide for you. Other than that, like, everybody else is kind of iffy, it feels like.
If you have Travis Kelce this year, it's actually, I don't know if you've seen what he's done this year. Like, he's leading the league in receiving yards this year as a tight end.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen. I think he's about 125 yards off the all-time mark for a tight end for receiving yards.
Which he'll get.
And they have 3 games left.
Like, he'll get it and then some.
Like, he's pacing to be the first tight end to ever win Offensive Player of the Year. Like, that's what... He's having a historic... Like, maybe the best... Definitely receiving-wise, but maybe all around, the best tight end season ever. Yeah. And if you drafted him, he's the only good guy this year, too. Like, usually you have 2 or 3 guys in that tier. And this year it's Travis Kelce and, like, I guess Darren Waller. Like, if you drafted him, you have the single greatest advantage in fantasy that we've seen in a while.
Yeah.
Because there's no one else, like, legitimately nobody else good at that position this year. Yeah, just looking at total fantasy points for Travis Kelce, he's 90 points up on the number 3 guy at the position.
Goodness gracious.
60 points up on the number 2. And that would be coming into this week where he dropped... Let me see here, 23.6 points.
Yeah.
Like, it's unfair what he's doing this season at the tight end position.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just, he's one of those guys where he's a set and forget it, and he could generally be one of your best players on your team. Not even kidding.
Yeah, I mean, in our format, like, we're half-point PPR, he's the 22 ranked player just overall. That doesn't happen from tight ends.
That does not happen. And I think that does not happen without Pat Mahomes. I think Pat Mahomes
Oh
is
no,
big.
that whole system is just when they do it a lot. They stack Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, and they make the defenders choose. Are you going to double Tyreek Hill deep, or are you going to double Travis Kelce underneath? And whatever's open is just free yardage. Like, it's just so easy with those two guys. It's been a special season to watch for Travis Kelce.
For sure. And some other games we'll just cover here quick. King Henry. Enough said. It's King Henry, so I don't feel we have to go too much in depth there.
I'm really sorry if you had to play him this week. That's a bad break.
What we're saying here is what did I say a couple episodes ago? I said Derrick Henry will turn it up in these last couple weeks of the playoffs, and I think it was a tweet from Matthew Berry. I just want to make sure I give the credit to the right guy, but it's Matthew. I think it was Matthew Berry, who's from ESPN, who said, "I think we have to stop calling the fantasy playoffs and just call it the Derrick Henry Invitational." Because it's like legitimately every year in the last couple weeks of the season, he will just blow up for like 200 yards rushing every single game.
It's crazy too, because I checked after the first quarter. It's about a quarter, maybe a little bit into the second quarter, and he was having a terrible game. Like, he had maybe like 15, 20 yards, and that was it. And then all of a sudden I look again like an hour later, and it's just like, oh, crap, he just absolutely went off. Like,
Went off, yeah.
It's crazy. I didn't have that game on. Like, I usually have 2 games on at a time. That wasn't one of them, because it was a blowout, or should have been a blowout the whole way, and checking the stat line was just crazy to see what Derrick Henry was doing.
Yeah, and then some other games like the Bengals are who we thought they were. They're trash. The Giants are kind of who we thought they were.
Yeah.
They're trash.
I was starting to think maybe they got a little something going, but they finally played a real I guess they beat the Seahawks, but I don't know. They're just their offense is too bad to really be a good team.
I'm not going to lie, with especially another one quick, the Washington football team winning. With the Washington football team winning and the Eagles winning a massive game that we'll cover a little bit later in the next segment. But with those two teams winning and the Giants losing, I'm not going to lie, I'm kind of excited to see how the end of this division goes down. Because this division right now is honestly one of the most exciting division races I've seen in football. Because
which is so sad with how bad those teams are.
With how bad that division is, that this is going to be the most exciting race in the division. I think the only other one that could rival it would be the Seahawks, Cardinals, and Rams division, with the Niners kind of out of it now at this point. That's probably the only division. Other than that, like, legitimately the NFC East could come down to like a 3-4 way tie. And that is crazy.
Yeah, there's really only a couple divisions up in the air. Like, theoretically, the AFC North, if the Browns win, Pittsburgh continues losing. I don't think the Browns are good enough for that to happen. I think, like, that game between the Ravens and Browns starts in a few minutes here. I think the Ravens win that pretty easily.
Yeah,
but
who knows? We'll see.
Titans-Colts is up in the air. That'll be fun to watch down the stretch. And then, that AFC or the NFC East, it's going to be weirdly exciting to watch, even though the football is generally pretty terrible.
Yeah, it's gonna be crazy, man. I'm honestly genuinely kind of excited to see how this goes. All right, so you know what? That's gonna wrap up our recap of Week 14 of some of the games that we thought were pretty notable to talk about for fantasy purposes. Now comes to the new segment of the Ryan and Logan Fantasy Show called Something or Nothing. And as I mentioned earlier, we're gonna go over we're going to give out a category, so it will be either a team or it'll be a certain player, and we're going to dictate whether what's happened with them in a little while has been either a something or it's a nothing. Maybe something you should look forward to, and maybe it's going to continue, or nothing is going to dissipate into nothing.
Yep.
Easy as that. So we're going to start off with the Thursday Nighter, Cam Akers. With what he did on Thursday night, is that a something or is that a nothing?
I think it's something, mainly just because he was the main guy. Like, we've seen that be a timeshare all season, and it seems like it's finally tilted to they have a guy they want to feed the ball to, which, if that's the case, we saw it with Todd Gurley for years. He was the guy to own, and that's partially because he's a talented running back, but it's partially because that offense is built to run the ball well, and they use their running back a lot, which for fantasy is really what you're looking for. So I think moving forward, he's going to be great.
I totally agree with that. I would also say that is a something. Because if you look at his last 3 weeks, San Francisco had 14.4 fantasy points. This is half-point PPR. This is what our league is. and he had 9 rushes for 84 yards and a touchdown. The next week, he had 21 rushes for 72 yards and a touchdown, but also he had a target for 1 reception, 22 yards. And then this game where he blew up for 29 rushes, 171 yards, added 3 targets for 23 yards. So in the last 3 weeks, his rush attempts have gone up, his yards have gone up, and his targets have gone up. And the fact that he touched the ball 32 times for that Rams offense, I think it just showed McVay has said he's our guy. And who knows, maybe McVay could pull an ultimate Darth Vader on us, and he could decide, you know what, Cam Akers is not going to start next game, or it's going to be back to a timeshare.
Yeah.
Who knows? Because McVay
it has happened with like Darrell Henderson kind of looked to be in the same situation early, but the biggest thing for me is that nobody else has really been worked in the last 2 games, because that was always the thing with Henderson. He looked great, and he got most of the touches, but the other guys still kind of filtered in like regularly. But Cam Akers has been the standalone.
And you know what? I think it's a big something, the fact that he's got the Seahawks and he's got the Jets the next 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So like I mentioned earlier, if you stashed him on your bench, or if you had him or you picked him off waivers, the fact that you have the opportunity to start him the next 2 weeks against 2 pretty much smash spots for this Rams offense.
Yeah.
I could legitimately think he could be a top 10 running back at the position, like for the next 2 weeks in fantasy, and I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
All
yeah,
right.
it's been interesting to watch all those rookie running backs. They've kind of all come on the last few weeks, which is it's strange because it was a talented class that seemed to maybe not be as good as we thought, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh wait, never mind, these guys are great. Like
they're all gonna blow up at the same time.
Yeah, like Jonathan Taylor, J.K. Dobbins, Cam Akers, like all of them are kind of just all of a sudden like, okay, yeah, we're good. We'll start performing now.
Don't forget about us over here. Don't worry. All right, so the next one, the pity offense. Pittsburgh Steelers have lost 2 straight games after starting their season 11-0. And you know what? Is this offense, with a little bit of their struggles the last 2 games, is this a something or a nothing?
I think it's something. Like, their O-line is genuinely been terrible this season. Like, it's not good. I don't know if that's why they're running the exact offense they are, but they can't run the ball. Most of their offense is turned into kind of just like screen passes and slants, which, with how many drops they're getting from their wide receivers, it's not looked good.
No, and you know what? I probably agree on you. I think it is a something. You know what? I think you're still going to be able to get your points out of your guys like Ebron and Johnson and Juju and Claypool, because like we've mentioned on the show, it feels like 1,000 times, the amount of throws is there. Like, they will still throw it because the run game does not look good. So they're going to be throwing it roughly about 40 to 50 times a game.
Yeah.
So the volume is there. But it's also, I feel like they've dropped, like, Johnson and Ebron are basically Butterfinger bros.
Yeah,
like, they drop everything.
Ebron, that's been a problem for his whole career.
And you know what? If you look at some of those plays, like especially last night against the Bills, like they had some plays where if he catches it and goes, him and Johnson, that's a first down and the offense keeps going. But when they drop it, it's now 4th down, and now they got to punt the ball away, which takes all the momentum out.
Yeah, they're an offense that relies on, like, they want to, like, their plays are short, so they need to be very crisp in the execution, because if you miss one, you're behind the chains, and I don't know if it's about time or if they don't trust Big Ben to throw downfield, but they aren't really generating much offense downfield, which actually, it worries me for Chase Claypool.
Yeah, that's something to be alarmed about. But you know what? They have Cincinnati next week, and if there's any game to really get it back on track for the Steelers, it's a must-win game for their division, especially if the Browns pull it out tonight.
Yeah.
That would be a must-win game. And then, you know what? Cincinnati's not a great defense, so if they're going to blow up, that's the one. If they don't do it then, I think it's really starting to be alarmed, because I believe they have Indianapolis in the very last game of the season for the Fantasy Championship, which is not a defense you want to go up if your offense is struggling.
No, I'm definitely concerned, but saying that, I'm starting Juju, I'm starting Deontay Johnson, and depending on who else you have, Claypool is still an option.
Yep. Okay, we're going to move on to the next one. T.Y. Hilton. T.Y. Hilton in the last 2 weeks has been he's been sensational at the wide receiver position for the Indianapolis Colts, catching multiple touchdown passes, I believe, in a couple games. And you know what? T.Y. Hilton has been that guy where he hasn't been that great for the majority of the season. I think in the last 3 weeks, he's had 3 straight 15-plus point fantasy games, And other than that, he hadn't reached double digits at all. And you know what? The last
Yeah.
couple games, he's had 5 targets, 11 targets, 7 targets, and he's had 4 touchdowns the last 3 games. So is this something or is this nothing?
I think this is another one where it is actually something. I don't know if I'd necessarily call him a locked and loaded wide receiver, but he's established himself as the one there. Like we were discussing for a bit, like, is it Michael Pittman? There was even some talk of Zach Pascal maybe being like the go-to target, but Phil Rivers has finally found T.Y. Hilton he probably is the best wide receiver on that team. Like, he's a very talented guy, and he is getting the targets now. And with the running game kind of opening things up for the play action, I think T.Y. Hilton has gone from probably waiver wire fodder to a low-end wide receiver starter.
Yeah.
I don't expect the 20-plus points to keep up, but I do think he's turned into a startable asset.
You know what? I want to say it's nothing, almost because it's like T.Y. Hilton has been great, but I feel like it's this weird one where it's not a something, but it's not a nothing. It's like it's a maybe.
Yeah.
Because you know what? I don't know if that's a good enough answer, but T.Y. Hilton has showed it in the past to be an unbelievable wide receiver. He's got Houston this week coming up, which, like we've already mentioned, this defense for Houston is terrible and can be beat. But if the rest of that offense looks just as good, so if you look at his targets, like he had 7 targets for 5 receptions and 2 touchdowns. Like, you're not going to catch 5 balls for 2 touchdowns every game.
No, definitely
and
not.
he only had 86 yards, which I'm pretty sure was like 2 big bombs for the touchdowns and then a couple little other catches in between. So he's got big playability.
Yeah.
So he could do this again against Houston. I can see it, but if he goes up against defense like Pittsburgh in Week 16, I don't believe that's going to hold up.
Yeah, I think he's a guy you're going to have to play the matchup on more than anything. Like, I don't think he's a smash start. I think he's if you need a guy, if you're playing the matchups, he's a guy you can start.
I think he's definitely more a flex option for you if you're really debating on if you want to start somebody with high upside coming into the playoffs. But it's almost at this point where if you hit an injury or you hit COVID, hopefully, unfortunately, you wouldn't. But if you do, maybe T.Y. is that guy that you could plug in and maybe he gives you a big game like this.
Yeah, I mean, looking forward to next week, I would be excited to start him. That's just me personally, but I like him a lot against Houston this week.
Absolutely. All right, so the next guy, it hurts me a little deeply here that he's going to be on this list, but Justin Herbert has not been the same Justin Herbert that we have experienced all season. Justin Herbert started this season just flying against KC, and he had an unbelievable game with 23 fantasy points. Other than that, he finished under 20 in Week 2 with 15. Since Week 4, he has had 20-plus points all the way up until Week 11 against the Jets. And these last 3 weeks, he has not scored more than 18-plus fantasy points. Now, is this a something or is this a nothing?
I think it's a nothing. Like, I'm just looking at the pass attempts that he's had, which are like going from the Buffalo game, which would be 3 weeks ago, to now, 52, 53, 44. I think he's a good quarterback. He's got the weapons, and he's throwing the ball a lot. So, like, it hasn't quite been there, but I'm not concerned with kind of what I've seen him do and the volume that's still there.
You know what? I will agree with you on that. I think this is a nothing for Justin Herbert. I feel like the anomaly game was the New England game because Bill Belichick has been famously known to feast on rookie quarterbacks.
Yeah.
And he just made his life miserable that day. So I feel like that game is an anomaly. Other than that, if you think about it, he hasn't finished under 16 points this whole fantasy season. Sorry, under 15, my bad.
Yeah.
Under 15 this whole fantasy season, which you think about for a rookie quarterback, that's massively impressive that he's been this consistent over the season. And I feel like with his matchups coming up, like I know he had Atlanta and didn't blow them up, but like you said, the pass attempts are there, and he has the Raiders, who got blown up by an old Phillip Rivers, and he has the Denver Broncos Week 16. So he's got blow-up matchups these last 2 weeks where the Chargers have proven that they can't really get ahead in games enough unless it's the Jets to really just kind of run the clock down and whatever. They're always going to have to throw the football. So you know what? The target share is going to be there for guys like Keenan Allen and Mike Williams and Austin Eckler. So he's going to throw the ball a ton. I think he's going to get back on track this week.
Especially against the Raiders. The Raiders have been just a mess the last few weeks. They just fired their defensive coordinator. So maybe you can make an argument of like, oh, bounce back. The defense is going to be fired up. But I mean, they should have lost to the Jets. Like, that's where that team is at. They got blown out by the Falcons, should have lost to the Jets, and they got blown out by the Colts. So the Raiders are in a serious tailspin. I think they're going to have, like, the Chargers offense is going to have a field day in that game.
And you know what? Coming off a short week, especially after finding the defensive coordinator, if they're going to be changing a whole system up with a new defensive coordinator, this could be Justin Herbert's time to just pick apart that defense that's not going to know what's going to hit them.
Yeah, they're not going to have time to change a whole lot on defense, other than maybe you just kind of get that, like, rah-rah effect of they're all fired up and ready to go, but it's got to, I don't know. I'm not excited about that Raiders defense. I don't think they're that talented.
Yep.
So I think that's a defense you could easily pick apart if you're Justin Herbert.
All right, next guy on our list is David Montgomery. David Montgomery has been one of those running backs all season where it's kind of just been, you know what, you're not really, he's just the kind of running back. It felt like all season. He hasn't done anything. But
he never hurt you, but he never really helped you.
Exactly. But now these last 3 weeks, he has scored 22 points, more than 22 points in 3 straight games, racking up 4 touchdowns in these last 3 games. Is this a something or is this a nothing?
I think this is another one that's a nothing. Like, what has made David Montgomery so valuable is the locked-in volume. And that volume, actually, in 2 of the last 3 weeks, hasn't really been there. Like, you got 11 rushes, 17 rushes, 11 rushes. And it's also been against the top 3 running back matchups that he's been great. So, it shows that he can expose a bad defense, but if it's even a half-decent defense and the volume's not there, I think he goes back to being what we've seen over the entirety of the season, which is a pretty average. Like, he's not going to hurt you, but I don't see, like, they got Minnesota this week. That's a game that both teams need really badly. I think the Minnesota defense is kind of shaping up. Like, they're not great, but they're not terrible. I think he's going to be fine. You can start him, but I don't think he's, like, in store for another great game or anything.
Yeah, you know what? I want to say that this is a something. Only because he has only started to do this ever since Mitch Trubisky took back over. If you want to look at the beginning of the season when Mitch played, and the first 3 games he had 7.9 points, 20 points, and then 6 points. And then once Foles took over, he was the kind of okay guy where he's going to average maybe like 6 to 15 points depending on how he was.
Yeah.
But something key to look at here is these last 3 games, he had, according to Yahoo, he had the 3rd ranked running back matchup, the 1st ranked running back matchup, and then the 2nd ranked running back matchup. He led the 3 worst teams that fit against the running back this season.
Yeah.
And he did what he was supposed to do against those defense. He just destroyed them. He went for 100 yards rushing in 2 of those games and went for 100 total yards the other game. So you know what? I think Mr. Trubisky coming back, I feel like he's more motivated. He's helped Robinson. He's helped Montgomery. And they have the Vikings. And like you said, it's a massive game for both teams. And they finished off the fantasy season with Jacksonville. So having those games, I think he could probably not blow up for 20 points again. But I can see him getting 15 points, being that kind of respectable running back that you probably drafted at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, and to your point, I brought this up earlier. He looks like a much better running back all of a sudden. So maybe he just, maybe it just took him some time to figure out the NFL and figure out how he has to play. So it is possible. I'm not going to lean that way, but I do see the arguments for it being an actual change in his fortunes.
Yeah, and hopefully if you own him, that continues, because if he's like, Robinson is basically getting everything through the air, and Montgomery's doing everything on the ground, and Trubisky is just Superman and somehow doing everything on, like, being great. If this continues and the Bears got something to play for, this is good news if you have Montgomery.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to finish off Somethings or Nothing with probably the biggest something or nothing, I think, of this week, and it is Jalen Hurts of the Philadelphia Eagles. He started his very first game at quarterback this season. He's played a little bit here and there, but he finally got the nod to play against the New Orleans Saints, and everybody thought, and myself, thought Jalen Hurts is going to get destroyed. There is no way this guy goes up against New Orleans and blows them up with that amazing defense that's going to just try to destroy him. And you know what he did? He started, and he won the game, and scored 19 fantasy points with also big key number 106 rushing yards. Now, is this something or is this nothing?
It's something. I mean, I look at Taysom Hill on the other side of the ball. Taysom Hill is a terrible quarterback, and he's been locked in for right around 20 points a week for fantasy, even though he's played terrible for an NFL standard. Jalen Hurts looked competent as a quarterback. So he rushed the ball 18 times, 100 yards. That's such a great baseline. If he got, imagine if he would have had a rushing touchdown in this game. Then you're looking, instead of 19 points, you're looking at closer to 25 points. That's against one of the best defenses in the league. So going forward, he gets the Cardinals this week. That's a much easier defense to go against. I think with the rushing floor, he's going to be great.
I'm also going to agree with you on that. I think Jalen Hurts is a something for the rest of the season. Because like we said multiple times on this show, rushing as a quarterback is a cheat code. And that's why Taysom Hill was so highly sought after on the waiver wire. And that's why he's been doing very well as of late. He didn't do as well as Jalen Hurts did this game, but having 18 rushing attempts for 100-plus yards, it helped Miles Sanders, I think, hugely, because all of a sudden that now defenses know that there's not Carson Wentz back there, doesn't move, that they have Jalen Hurts that can just escape the pocket and just run for whatever he wants. I feel that it makes defense have to play a little more honest. They can't just lock up their wide receivers and then just rush the quarterback all day long. They actually have to worry about this, and that helps. Like I said, it helps Sanders had a banner day for him. It's not going to be great for the wide receivers. You're going to have to kind of pick and choose. I don't think you can kind of rely on all of them because the throwing's not going to be there, it looks like. But like you said, if he had a rushing touchdown, he'd be one of the top quarterback starts of the week, let alone just the day. He would have had the week.
Yeah, I think the craziest thing is the Saints. I think it was 2018 the last time they allowed a 100-yard rusher. They allowed 2 in this game.
Yeah,
that's a wild stat. Which, I mean, most of what the Eagles were doing were just run options. It was pretty similar to what the Ravens did last year. That was so successful. The quarterback reads whether he's handing it to the running back or he's running it himself, and it was working, and it looked great.
Yeah, and you know what? I will agree with you because the next two matchups are the Cardinals and the Dallas defense. And you know what? I don't like both of those defenses to stop a guy like this. And the more important thing, I think, is the Eagles got something to play for.
Yeah.
There's legitimately could be, like we've mentioned already, a 4-way tie for that division in theory. So they got to try to win these games. And with the Cardinals and Dallas, those are two very beatable defenses.
Yeah, and they play Washington week 17. So that could very well be a win to get in for the division. So they will be in it the rest of the season.
And don't forget this. As much as people want to make fun of that division has a couple teams that are still, in theory, fighting for the wild card. Like the Giants could get into the wild card, and with the other teams, like the Giants are pretty much the only team that could get into the wild card. Also, maybe the Washington football team, but they would need a lot of help. But let's say everything bounced the right way for them and a couple teams lost. This game against the Cardinals would be huge for the Eagles because the Cardinals hold that last wild card spot. So that could be huge for them. But for again to go back to Jalen Hurts, I think he's definitely a guy that you could probably start. And depending on if you have a guy like a Big Ben who relies a lot more on passing yards, would you rather take the passing yards from Big Ben or take the rushing floor of a guy like Jalen Hurts at this point?
Oh, I'd be taking Hurts easily. Again, we talked about that Steelers offense has looked pretty bad. So I'd much rather take Hurts, who looks good. He's got the much more secure kind of baseline with his rushing yards than take the risk on Big Ben.
I think you just hurts all the Steelers fans out there.
They know. They've been watching it.
Hurts the Steelers fans.
Yep.
Okay, sorry.
I heard it.
That was
I chose to ignore it.
That was just my terrible joke of the episode. I'm sorry. All right, so that's going to wrap up Somethings or Nothings. And with that, it's also going to wrap up this episode of the Ryan and Logan Fantasy Show. As always, we'd like to thank you for listening. We really appreciate you guys who watch these videos. You know, we just do this for fun. And if you guys get something out of it and learn something from this and maybe use our advice, we really like that. It's cool. You know what? Yep. We can do the best we can to help you out. So if you liked our content, please hit the like button and the subscribe button and also the notification bell. That way you don't miss any of our new content. And we will be back again later this week to talk about round 2 of the playoffs. Other than that, hopefully your team moved on and you were still competing for fantasy glory. And you know what? Enjoy tonight's game that you will probably not hear anyway. So I don't even know why I'm talking about it. But you know what? We'll see you next time. And as always, stay classy.